At a high-end hotel in Underdog City, a private club was alive with noise and music. Deep within it, the most expensive VIP lounge overflowed with laughter, shouting, and the clinking of glasses. The 7 leading members of the Community Watchmen of Youth sat together, each one a representative of one of the 7 houses. They stacked towers of expensive, rare wine and drank without restraint. Even the attendants were grateful when allowed to taste the wine that spilled across the table. One of them raised his glass high, voice slurred with amusement, and gave a toast, thanking the great Baskerville family for their protection. Without their name, he shouted, none of them could have grown so rich from the slave trade. Another laughed, calling the Main family idiots for not realizing how their name was being used. All the Baskervilles cared about, he said, was expansion. The first man went on, smirking as he mentioned the Messi-Madunaro family. After that incident, the blame had been pushed onto the Baskervilles, who never even learned the truth. Because of it, the Messi-Madunaro line was wiped out, leaving only 7 families in the city. The others raised their glasses and laughed, saying that was what happened to anyone who tried to challenge them. Then the topic shifted. The same man who had been leading the talk leaned back in his chair and asked if they had heard of the new deputy magistrate appointed to the city. The others looked at him and shook their heads. He smirked, tapping his glass against the table, mentioning that the man's name was Vikir and that he had made quite a scene when he first arrived. Only 15 and already drawing attention. He added that he had already sent him an invitation, thinking it would be amusing to meet him in person. He then wondered if someone like that might fit in with them, or if he needed to be shown his place. He went on saying they would bring him here, throw a grand party in his honor, and when the bill came, leave it in his name. Once he couldn't pay, he would be under their thumb. They all laughed, proud of their plan. The door opened as one of the help stepped in, announcing that he had brought the women. A man at the table noticed a male among the escorts. It was Vikir. He asked if anyone had requested a male escort. The staff member, confused, asked if he knew the boy. The man replied that he didn't. The staff member grabbed Vikir by the hair, demanding to know what he thought he was doing walking in uninvited. Vikir's eyes narrowed. A sharp crack rang through the room, making the men turn toward the sound. The staff looked down in shock at his wrist hanging loosely from his arm, the pain setting in only after a few seconds. He fell back, crying out, as Vikir walked past him toward the table. Vikir introduced himself, his presence silencing the room. The 2 men who had been boasting earlier whispered to each other, asking if they should carry out their plan now. Vikir placed his hand on the table and calmly asked for their attention. A wave of energy rippled outward, shattering the stacked glasses of expensive wine. The main man froze. If that was aura, then the boy was a sword graduator. Fear spread through him. Another man whispered that no 15-year-old should be capable of that. The main man muttered for him to do something, calling him the strongest swordsman there. The other refused, saying he didn't have a death wish. Vikir rested a hand on one man's shoulder, drawing his attention. The man panicked, blurting that they would pay for the drinks. Vikir stared at him and said it was only natural to pay for one's own drinks. What a strange thing to say. Then he asked if they had planned to make him pay for them. The main man quickly denied it, claiming they had only been testing him to see if he had what it took to govern such a corrupt city. Vikir struck the man he had been staring at and threw him to the ground. He pressed his boot against the man's head and asked the others if they understood why he had done this. They rushed to agree, their voices trembling. Vikir said that if they truly understood, then they knew what came next. He pressed down until the man's head gave way, blood splattering across the floor. The others stood, shouting and cursing. One swore he wouldn't get away with this, but before he could move, Vikir was already in front of him. Vikir told them he knew they didn't understand. Then he listed their crimes: abduction, kidnapping, illegal slave trafficking, insulting the Baskerville clan. He said animals never learned until they were taught. He moved his arm toward the man in front of him and blood splattered across his face as another body fell. Later, in the Underdog dungeons, Vikir and Chihuahua walk the corridor and stop at a cell. Inside are the remaining members of the youth society. The man at the front of the bars warns Vikir that once his father finds out what he did, he will kill him and demands immediate release. Chihuahua studies the battered men and tells Vikir he may have gone too far. This will bring the 7 houses down on them. Vikir tells him he has not even started yet. When Chihuahua asks what he means, Vikir answers that even the rich must pay for their crimes. The law does not discriminate. Look at them, he says. They have not learned. Once the sun sets, he will execute them all. He will also pursue any accomplices associated with them. As Vikir walks away, the men in the cell cry for forgiveness. Chihuahua warns that their families will not stand idly by and will work against him for vengeance. Vikir tells him not to worry. Once he reveals their crimes, they will have no grounds to complain. Chihuahua presses him about evidence. It needs to be clear for the families to concede. Vikir is unconcerned. If necessary, he will make his own. In the long term, it will not matter. The world will change and everyone will have larger problems. Vikir read the charges to the men in the cell: human trafficking, kidnapping, bribery, blackmail, threatening, assault through a third party, and murder. The main man at the front declared the claims false and said that if Vikir could prove them, he would gladly accept punishment. Vikir told him he spoke as if he had done it, thinking they had no proof. The man stuttered, unsure how to respond. A torturer arrived, dragging a large sack behind him. Vikir greeted him calmly as the man said the custom order had arrived. Inside were tools for torture, built to break a person. The torturer asked how Vikir had come up with such designs. Vikir said he hadn't, someone else had. The man wondered if they came from hell itself. Vikir replied that it was something like that. Vikir then asked if he wanted to learn how to use them, but the torturer stepped back, saying that even he didn't have the stomach for it. Vikir felt a quiet nostalgia as he looked at the tools. Even demons once bled out their secrets with these things. He rolled his sleeves, turned to the main man in the cell, and told him they would see how long his denial could hold. He gave a slow, chilling grin and urged him to resist for as long as possible. Rumors spread throughout Underdog City. The 7 wicked gang members who had lived in luxury were arrested. People muttered that it would be a mere slap on the wrist, certain the men would be freed soon. Most called it a power play, meant to force the houses to bend the knee. Nothing had really changed, they said. The 7 main families delivered an apology to the new magistrate, offering gold for the freedom of their sons and grandsons. Everyone expected release. They were wrong. In the main square, 7 heads were displayed, preserved in salt for all to see, their faces frozen in the agony of their final moments. Above them hung a public notice listing the crimes and the punishments. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Vikir watched from a window and smiled. He told Chihuahua that they should not be surprised. These were laws that had long been in place. Perhaps, he added, the common people were simply surprised that those laws also applied to the 7 houses. Vikir warned that after sending that message, there might be a bloodbath. He told Chihuahua to be ready, because Chihuahua would be joining him on his next plan. Chihuahua stood deep in the wilderness, far from any watchful eyes. A masquerade mask covered his face. Flickering torchlight illuminated the clearing where rough tents and cages had been set up among the trees. He glanced back toward one of the cages and asked if this was really a good idea. Vikir, now disguised as a young barbarian boy with long hair, smiled and told him to trust him. The cages began to move as masked figures in luxurious carriages made their way toward a large tent at the center of the camp. Watching them, Chihuahua hesitated, wondering if being sold as a slave was really a good idea. The slave gathering, of course, was an illegal one, a trade never reported to the Baskerville family. The goods on offer ranged from abducted barbarians to captured aristocrats and commoners alike. At the center of the tent stood a man who acted like a ringleader in a circus, calling out to the masked crowd and welcoming them to the circus. His voice carried above the noise, rich with false cheer. He approached Chihuahua, who was under cover as a member of the Manblanc family, bringing his goods into the auction. Surprised, the ringleader checked his papers, remarking that it was strange. According to their ledgers, the Manblancs were always buyers, never sellers. He asked if Chihuahua had been disappointed with his earlier purchases. Chihuahua told him not at all. Their quality had always been top-notch. The ringleader's eyes shifted to Vikir, studying him closely. He noted the boy's long black hair and red eyes, rare traits for a slave. Smiling, he assured Chihuahua that this one would fetch a great price. The show began as the crowd gathered inside the tent. Excited whispers filled the air as masked buyers speculated about what would be offered tonight. The ringleader stepped onto the stage, spreading his arms wide and announcing the start of the auction. He wished everyone luck with their purchases before the first item was brought out. It was a monster known to have 19 hearts, a murcielago. The bidding started immediately, voices overlapping in excitement until the creature was finally sold for 250 million. The auction continued for some time, deal after deal striking through the dimly lit tent. Then a member of the circus leaned in close, whispering something to the ringleader. His expression fell. He asked quietly how they were supposed to sell something like that, but after a moment he forced a grin and stepped forward. He announced the next item, a rare slave from the depths of the jungle, a warrior from a tribe said to live in Le Rouge et le Noir. A girl was escorted out, bound and muzzled, thrashing like a beast. The ringleader introduced her as one of the Valak tribe. She growled and fought against her restraints, and he muttered under his breath, wondering how they expected him to sell something like this. He started the bidding at 5 million gold, but the crowd remained silent. He lowered it to 1 million, yet still no one moved. Finally he sighed and told a hooded man to take her away, saying there was no point trying to sell unwanted goods. The man tried to drag her off, but she struggled violently, snarling like a wild animal until he struck her across the head, knocking her out before carrying her away. The ringleader returned to the stage, bowing slightly as he apologized to the crowd for the last offering. To make up for it, he promised that the next one would be extra special. From the shadows, Vikir was led into the center of the tent. The crowd's mood shifted immediately. Murmurs spread through the masked faces as their interest grew. The ringleader declared that this boy was the finest slave on offer, obedient enough to need only light restraints. Before he could even finish his introduction, a woman stood and offered 600 million. Another voice cut through, raising the bid to 800. The two began to argue, the woman scoffing and asking what a man could possibly want with a boy like that. Their quarrel was interrupted when someone calmly raised the bid to 6 billion. The tent fell silent. The ringleader froze, repeating the amount to make sure he'd heard correctly. When no one else spoke up, he slowly asked if there were any more bidders. Silence answered him. All eyes turned toward the bidder, Baron Gambino. Whispers spread quickly as the crowd recognized him. Standing beside him, his assistant leaned close and quietly asked if he might be spending too much on a single slave. The Baron laughed, saying a beautiful slave like this would be an investment. The woman replied that it might be, but only if the boy remained in one piece. The Baron's smile faded. He told her to hold her tongue, and not speak against her master. The ringleader, eager to move things along, announced Baron Gambino as the winner. Vikir was brought forward for inspection. The Baron smiled as he looked him over, thinking he looked even better up close. He told the boy not to be nervous. He wasn't a bad man. Then, with a grin that turned dark and twisted, he said he couldn't wait to play with him. Vikir raised his arms, showing the shackles around his wrists. The Baron asked if he wanted them removed. Vikir said nothing, and simply broke the chains himself. He looked down at the Baron and told him that if he wanted to play, then they would play. Vikir's foot hit the ground like a hammer, splintering the floor in an instant. The shock rippled through the tent, knocking the Baron off his feet as the ground split beneath him. Vikir stepped forward, saying they would play a game called Spears and Shields. He took hold of the Baron's arm, his grip tightening like iron. He said the Baron would be the shield, and he himself the spear, and wondered how long the Baron could endure. Then he squeezed. A sharp crack echoed through the tent as the Baron screamed in pain, calling for his assistant to summon the guards. But she couldn't move. She could only stare as the Baron's cries faded into silence. When he finally passed out, Vikir sighed, disappointed, and muttered that he supposed he had won. He reached up, pulled off his long wig, and tossed it aside. The assistant's eyes widened in shock. She recognized him instantly. Vikir van Baskerville. The crowd began to murmur, fear spreading like wildfire. Someone whispered, asking if the deputy magistrate himself was here. Vikir's voice cut through the noise. He told everyone in the tent that none of them should expect to return home in one piece. The ringleader barked for the guards to get rid of the deputy magistrate. 3 leapt forward, blades raised. Vikir unsheathed Beelzebub and in one fluid motion decapitated all 3. Their heads hit the ground before their bodies did. The ringleader saw the red aura spilling from Vikir and realized with a frozen stare that they faced a sword graduator. He muttered that it should be impossible for someone so young to wield that kind of might. They would stand no chance. He seized Chihuahua and held him up like a shield, ordering Vikir to surrender or he would kill the man. Chihuahua told Vikir not to listen and to save himself. He would rather die than be a liability. Vikir laughed and called him loyal, then said not to worry. He still had one card to play. From a strap behind his leg he pulled a whistle and blew. The sound shredded through the tent. Everyone cupped their ears and staggered. The ringleader sneered, expecting no more than noise, then stiffened as a blade pierced through his throat from behind. He collapsed forward, revealing a hooded figure standing with a sword. A guard lunged at the hooded man. The stranger didn't even step back. His blade flashed once and the guard fell in pieces. The crowd froze as blood hit the floor. From the corners of the tent, more hooded men emerged, forming a ring around everyone inside. The air thickened. A few guards muttered in disbelief as they recognized the insignia on the hooded men. It really was them. The young assistant looked closer and saw the emblem on their chests, the mark of the Pitbull Order. Her face drained of color. She had heard the stories, the Pitbulls, the most brutal nightly force in the Empire, every member a sword graduator, every mission ending in complete annihilation. She stepped back, frozen, until a Pitbull loomed behind her. The hooded man began to unsheath his sword, and she thought it was the end for her. Vikir suddenly stepped between them and told the man not to kill her. The hooded man jumped back, then dropped to a knee in obedience. He ordered the man to cut down anyone who tried to flee and leave those who submitted alive. He obeyed and vanished in a flash. Vikir considered himself fortunate. Hugo had granted him authority over the Pitbulls when he asked. He had not expected him to agree. As the Pitbulls moved through the tent, subduing and separating the crowd, one man lay trembling on the floor, planning to stay still until the chaos passed so he could slip away. He watched a Pitbull approach and, desperate,
offered to be cuffed. The pit bulls stared coldly and said they did not carry cuffs. The man, trembling on the floor, asked what now. The pit bull raised his blade and, with a single motion, severed the man's legs. He told him he would not need limbs to attend his execution.
After the operation was complete, Vikir met his uncle outside, the leader of the pit bulls, Boston Terrier. Boston greeted him with a grin and asked his dear nephew what he thought of the pit bulls and if they were satisfactory. Vikir calmly told him they were. Boston laughed, pleased, and assured him that if he ever needed help again, all he had to do was say the word. He thought to himself that he now understood why his brother had taken such an interest in the boy. Even at 15, Vikir was sharp-witted and cruel. He reached out and rubbed his nephew's head, laughing as he told him he should join the pit bulls in the future. He said he would mould him into a proper man. Vikir looked annoyed but stayed respectful, telling him he would think about it before excusing himself to attend to other matters. Boston watched him walk away, entertained by the boy's nerve to ignore him so casually. It only made him want to recruit him more. Vikir, on the other hand, thought his uncle was simply too much. Vikir went into the back where the slaves were kept. The area was cluttered with cages and supplies. He moved past them without a word until his eyes landed on the vault where the money had been stored. That would make a fine addition to the city's coffers, he thought. He wasn't pleased about helping House Baskerville grow richer, but that wasn't what he was here for. He had another purpose tonight. Pulling the tarp off one of the cages, he revealed the slave from earlier, the wild girl from the auction. She was battered and bruised, lying still and unconscious inside the cage.